A very good morning to you, SK, and good morning to South Africa as well, as we come to you in the morning before the budget is expected to be announced. Enoch Godongwana expected to begin his budget at around about 2 o'clock this afternoon, coming to you live from the City Hall here in Cape Town. And as you said, a glorious day. It really is a magnificent day in Cape Town. So I was expecting cold fronts, but there's anything but a cold front here. It is looking good. I hope that is something that we can read into when it comes to the budget for 2023. However, I have my doubts, and so do a lot of the experts and analysts that are looking to this budget during an exceptionally difficult time for South Africa. An unemployment rate that just keeps on getting higher, growth that just feels like it's nowhere to be found, and an electricity crisis or an energy crisis that is truly bringing South Africa to its knees. These are some of the things that the minister has to address, as well as the spiraling poverty. I mean, one just has to look around wherever you are in South Africa, and you just see the poverty levels growing more and more and more. And that is, of course, something we want to speak about with my next guest, is the expectations and predictions for this budget speech that will be getting underway a little bit later. Isaac Mashego, who is from Nedbank, is here with us to talk a little bit about this. Isaac, it's a tough one. This is we say it every year, and I don't know if we say it every year because it gets harder every year, and to try and find money in places without getting into trouble is turning more and more difficult, isn't it?
Absolutely, Leanne. And in recent years, it's been a bit of a tough situation with the impact of COVID on government revenue. But we have seen a nice rebound in tax collections. So that's giving National Treasury some money to spend. But the priorities, of course, are also increasing. I mean, the energy crisis is quite prominent right now, and we expect the minister to sort of spend some time really announcing the measures that are going to be taken. This will be a follow-up to the announcements by the president in the State of the Nation address. So we expect the energy crisis to sort of be the main topic today.
Yeah, it certainly will. But before we get into what we can perhaps expect from that, what are we dealing with when we talk to increased collections in terms of tax? What numbers is the minister playing with?
Well, I mean, our own estimates suggest that, compared to the mini budget in October, tax collections for this fiscal year, which ends on 31 March, should be about 8.2 billion, more than what the National Treasury expected in October. So that gives, National Treasury a bit of more money to locate to the different priorities.
And that, of course, I imagine, driven a lot by commodities, the commodities boom, which is not looking too good at the moment. So going forward, I'm not sure he's going to have that much to play around with.
Yes, the commodity boom that we benefited so handsomely from in 2021 and 2022 is starting to taper off. So that simply means that corporate tax collections are going to weaken, and the government will have to keep on focusing on ensuring that it keeps the growth in expenditure under control.
Tax increases, any predictions there? Do you think South Africa can afford any tax increases right now?
Well, in last year's budget, sentiment was tax reductions, after, the tax increases that we saw from 2016, which culminated in a higher VAT rate. The government is leaning towards reversing those tax increases. We know that this year we'll see the corporate tax rate drop from 28 to 27%. So on the tax side, I would say that we can be relieved that we're not going to see any increases. We don't expect that at all.
Well, I hope so. Obviously, the sin taxes, that's a given. It happens every time. There's never leeway on that one, even though I'm hearing calls from beer producers and wine producers saying, listen, don't do it to us. But we can almost guarantee it is going to happen. I want to talk energy now, because that is the topic, of course, that's stealing the limelight right now, and stealing the light is exactly, I suppose, a way of looking at it. But the reality is that the minister has to find money to rectify the situation, to take on at least 2/3 of Eskom's debt, perhaps looking at incentives, tax incentives for solar panels and things like this. He's got to be very clever when dealing with this. What are your expectations?
Absolutely. In the mini budget, the minister indicated that there'll be some details in the budget about, National Treasury taking over some of Eskom's debt, between 1/3 and 2/3. We expect the minister to sort of table the initial proposals. It's going to be a long process, 2-3 years negotiations with the bondholders, and that will help to stabilize Eskom's finances. And then on the tax incentives, hopefully we're going to see some incentives for investment in renewables, for households, solar panels, and also for the corporate sector, investment in embedded generation.
All right, Isaac, I'm going to leave you because I know you've got to get into lockdown before this all begins. So thank you. We'll be watching it, and as you will be in the front row seat. And in the meantime, as I let you go, I'm going to actually call in Matthews Parks, who is from Kasatu. Isaac, thank you very, very much for your time. Matthews, good to see you. And, as we've been hearing from Isaac, it's a tough moment for the finance minister. I suppose no more difficult than it has been over these last couple of years. It has been a very difficult time. However, with balancing Eskom on his shoulders, this is going to be a lot harder for him, no doubt.
Well, it's even tougher for workers who are drowning in debt and struggling to support relatives who lost jobs. It's tougher for the 43% of the country which is unemployed. But I think we don't have a choice. The minister has to table a progressive budget which is going to deal with a multiple set of crises. We can't afford to neglect them. We can't afford to have a timid budget. So number one has to be given support, as you said, to Eskom. If we can get load shedding under control, we can end it. That enables all companies to go about their business. It enables companies to sell the products, to pay their workers. So we do hope to see a debt relief package of up to 2/3 of Eskom's debt, as well as measures to support Eskom on the wasteful expenditure, on the corruption, on maintenance, on new generation. Equally critical is to give support to Transnet, which is critical to mining, to manufacturing, to agricultural jobs, and it really is under siege from cable theft and criminality. Equally critical in the same vein is Metro Rail, which is key to transporting 10 million commuters in our cities to work on time into the urban economies. We hope to see all the progressive commitments in the State of the Nation address being given some sort of, money today, including many of our SOEs, from Denel to the Post Office to SABC, to our municipalities in rural areas which are really struggling in a financial crisis, some sort of plan to help them get back onto their feet. There has been some progress we've seen around the fight against corruption. For example, on the issue of the SARS, the tax authority has managed to deal with some significant amount of tax evasion. Let's give them more support, because that gives government the resources it needs to provide for quality basic services. We have seen some progress in response to our calls to begin to reinforce the police service. So 10,000 police officers employed last year, another 10,000 will be employed this year. But we need to see more support being given, not just to the police, but to the prosecuting authority, to the courts, to really tackle crime and corruption. The government has the money, but it needs to manage it properly.
That's the problem, and I mean, even when we were speaking to some of the SOPA addresses that have happened around the country, yes, they have the money, yes, they have the ideas, but those that need to implement them are where the problem lies. It's the reality of, do you want to get rid of corruption when it seems to be lining certain people's pockets? And that is the problem, the implementation of everything that's going to be announced here today.
Yeah, no, we have no choice, and government has no choice. There's an election in 15 months. Yeah. We don't have 15 months to play games. We don't have 24 months to sort out electricity. We've got 6 months. If government does well, voters will reward it next year. If the government fails, well, voters will render their verdict. But for society, we just don't have the time, not with a 43% unemployment rate. But there is some progress we have seen around SARS and so forth. We need to build upon that, but government has to be decisive. So we hope that they can extend, for example, the SOD grant, which has given relief to 8 million unemployed people. Let's make sure all 12 million unemployed people receive it. Let's see if we can increase it, link it to skills and employment programs. The presidential employment stimulus has done well. It's given 500,000 young people work opportunities. We hope we can see it being increased, as the president said, to 1 million people by April 2 million by October, because you need to help young people get into the labour market, get some experience so they can find jobs.
Do you think we'll see an increase in grants? Because, I mean, the majority of people watching right now, unfortunately, are dependent on these grants, and we are becoming we heavily dependent on the grants that government pay out. But your predictions on that, and are you calling for increases across the board in these grants that are handed out to South Africans that have no money coming in?
We have to. We can't afford to send the poorest people into more poverty. At least we need inflation-linked increases to the social grants, especially the SOD grant, which hasn't been increased since 2020 in terms of the monetary amount. We have to do this in the meantime, because you can't afford to leave a quarter of society, or in fact the 27 million people behind. You need to give them some sort of hope whilst you grow the economy, whilst you stimulate the economy. In the meantime, we have to take people with us. But I think also, Leanne, what often we miss in the budget, and people often from the opposition parties focus on the wage bill, they forget that if you want to create a capable public service, a well-oiled machinery, you need to also sort of the relationship between the state as an employer and public servants. If you want nurses to be motivated when they're covering 2 or 3 vacant posts, if you want police officers earning a pittance to be motivated to fight well-resourced criminals, we need to make sure we repair a relationship with public servants, pay them a living wage, because they too are also supporting relatives who are drowning in debt.
Well, I mean, everybody talking about that increasing wage bill, but I mean, unions still adamant they want 10%. I mean, do you think it's feasible in this current environment? And I know what you're saying, give those that are working in these key sectors what they deserve, but can the country afford this?
Yeah. So look, the 10% is part of the negotiating strategy. Government needs to go negotiate in good faith. You always come from a low position, a high position. You'll find each other halfway, get thereabouts. But public servants didn't get an increase in 2020. They're drowning in debt, etc. But equally, we're seeing with COVID-19, we need a well-oiled machinery in terms of the health services. We had nurses having to sort of patients in parking lots. We have seen with SARS the value of investing in public servants, employing more people, because it generates the quality public service we need to grow the economy. Cutting corners doesn't really help us in the long term.
Matthew's got to leave it there. We've got to take a break, and I know that you also scheduled for another interview. Good luck for today. Thank you for talking to us. Always a pleasure speaking to Matthew Parks, who of course is the parliamentary representative for COSATU.